Welcome back. And now I would like to introduce you our last speaker, a final presenter, which is Stephen Bendon, Vice President of Anomaly Threat Research. I'm looking forward to this presentation, and his topic will be Elite Security Operations Center Performance to Intelligence-Led Security Operations, the Wartime Perspective. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a delight to be here again, and thank you very much for coming for the last presentation slot. It's been a long 3 days, but I hope you're going to find this informative and maybe even inspiring. We're certainly very inspired with what we're doing at Anomaly, and I want to share some of that, but I actually want to put it into the context of where I come from. So yes, I'm Vice President of Threat Research at Anomaly, but before that, 2 years ago, I was Chief Security Officer at BT, British Telecommunications. And for those of you that may not know who BT Group are, they are a global communications provider operating in about 170 countries around the world. We are a communications provider in the UK across fixed, mobile, and broadband communications. At the time, we were also a TV and entertainment provider and a broadcaster. So we were part of the critical national infrastructure within the UK. So I have seen everything from script kiddies to hacktivists to serious organized criminal gangs to nation states and to terrorists, because I also looked after physical security operations as well as cyber security operations. And very soon after taking my role in BT, I realized that I was in a combat zone. I set the objectives, however, for my security team to ensure we were focusing on the enemy with 3 words: expensive, dangerous, and worthless. And let me explain what I mean by those. First of all, expensive. That attackers would have to invest significantly in terms of time and capability to mount an attack that had a chance of being successful against us. Secondly, dangerous. That our response would gather evidence that we could share with appropriate that would curtail the liberties of do us or our customers harm. And lastly, worthless. In understanding what their gain objectives were, we would ensure that any possible gain for the attacker would be severely limited, and we would frustrate and disrupt opportunities for them to monetize on that. And we let this then guide our strategy and our operations. And you know, combat hasn't changed in millennia, and Sun Tzu put it very simply back in 500 BC, if you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. So remember this, it's a good mantra to have if you're operating and managing security. Because in all risk and threat scenarios, you must strive to understand both. As your business develops its next product or service, as it embarks on its next stage of digitalization, you must understand what you're adding to the attack surface and the business value that it is supporting. And in doing so, then, you can realize what an attack could mean for your organization in terms of an attacker gaining entry, gaining persistence, gaining a leverage position, and ability to extract value from you or your customers. And in the very dynamic domain of cybersecurity and attacks, this is particularly true. So now, I know my security mission. And as I reflect on my time in transforming how BT approached the security mission, it essentially boils down to one word, and that one word is grip. And let me explain what I mean by grip. The word grip is defined as having the combination of knowledge and understanding and ability to exercise control over a situation. So, for example, in a personal perspective, have you got grip on your personal finances? You hope so, right? So, that's grip. But as I thought about, you know, my business saying to me, Steve, have you got grip on our security? It actually separates into 3 key areas. First up is the threat landscape. What visibility do we have into the what and the why of the threats? Who's likely to target us and why? What's at risk? What are the key trends? Who's active now? If I understand that, that is my relevant threat landscape for what I'm trying to protect. Okay, so I'm starting to know the enemy. What about myself? How protected and prepared are we for what is now likely to come towards us in terms of attack? And when I talk about these actors, I'm talking about not just who would target my industry, but who might be active in the locations in where I operate, or the technologies in which I depend upon, or indeed my supply chain. So it's a broad scope of a threat landscape to understand. So how protected, prepared are we? Am I reducing the opportunity for attack? That's my attack surface. That's everything that faces out into the internet where the attack comes from, unless I'm facing into an insider threat. Have I optimized, therefore, my security operations to be able to understand my posture and to shift my posture as I need to? Because I want to be situationally aware for the business. So if back in the day, when we were a broadcaster, we had the rights in the UK to the Champions League. And one year, the Champions League was held in Cardiff, and we were the broadcaster. So at that time, we rallied around looking at our security posture against what could stop that being successful in terms of a broadcast. So situational awareness is really important. And therefore, do I have immediate and actionable visibility? Last area of grip is when the bad stuff happens. I have to say to the business, there's no such thing as 100% security. So when something is happening, can I detect and respond at the pace of any incident? If I can keep pace or get ahead of it, then I can minimize the harm and disruption to the business. So what am I seeing? Now, if I've got grip in those three areas, guess what I can do? I can maintain a security narrative with the stakeholders in the wider business, with the C-level and the exec, aligned to the business goals and objectives. I am now what I would call an investable CISO. It's worth investing in my organization and what I do and listening to me, because I'm part of assuring the growth and success of our business. So you can think of this like a three-legged stool, right? And a three-legged stool is a very, very stable structure. But it's only a stable structure if all of the three legs are strong and they're equal. Otherwise, it's a bit uncomfortable to be sitting on it. So it's really important to get these three things operating together. And when you do, you can deliver unparalleled value to the organization. But truthfully, getting grips to security mission in a modern enterprise is really tough. And it got even tougher in the wake of COVID, because what happened to organizations? They had to digitize themselves really rapidly in allowing remote working. And so the employees are more digitally connected, internet native perhaps. Your supply chains, your marketplaces, everything had to take a massive leap forward in terms of digitization. That then offered a huge opportunity to attackers, because they realize that if they can interfere with that, they can gain information that they can sell, they can disrupt business, they can extort, they can steal intellectual property. So that became a real pressure cooker environment for the security teams, because cyber threat is now a full-on business interruption risk. You get cyber threat wrong, the business could stop. And for some businesses, that's like an existential threat. So the last bullet here in terms of cost constraints, really aligns with a lot that I was thinking of, because security, I was always reminded, is an overhead for the business. It's part of our cost base. And of course, to maximize our profitability for our stakeholders, we want to maximize revenues and minimize costs. So I'm in that squeeze as well. So I need to have visibility. I need to have everything, everywhere, all at once in order to have this grip. Wow, that's a big challenge, because traditional security tools are quite limited in what they can give me in terms of that visibility, what I can afford in terms of that visibility, and the window at which I can span across in order to understand it. Because I need to be able to preempt, improve, and sustain the security posture. Whew, hard stuff. And I realized, actually, there are two modes of security operation. A lot of SOCs have defined themselves or are seen by outsiders as the cavalry that come over the hill when there's a security incident. But when there's nothing that's really significant happening, and by the way, in my security team, I was defending BT against about 4,500 attacks every day. But the majority of those we had handled within our security posture and our automatic protection, detection, and response. So between significant incidents, what do you do with your time? Well, this is where you need to be recovering from previous incidents, reflecting on what you learned from that, regrouping and resolving. Prepare for war, because the next battle will come. But you don't know how long you have, right? It isn't that you can put a sign up on the door saying, we're recovering from the previous incident, we're not open to attacks for the next month, thanks very much, because we're going to do a lot of work here, right? It could come any time. So you need to prioritize your time in the security hygiene, in your discovery, to look at the assets that are facing out into the internet, into doing threat hunting, preparing playbooks, practicing, doing purple teaming, looking at trends and posture. But you need to be allying that to the threat actors and the sorts of attacks that are more likely to come your way, as I was talking about. And that's what I talked about yesterday in Peacetime. What about wartime? Well, this is the most stressful time for a CISO and their teams. It's a huge stress for the business too. And it often feels like something's on fire. There's something on fire in the cyber infrastructure of the business. And it throws into like visceral visibility what's at stake to the business and the severe operational and reputational impact of cyber attacks. But without the peacetime preparation, wartime becomes a purely reactive response, just running towards the fire. Now, firefighters don't do that. They don't just run towards the fire. They understand fire. They understand how fire operates. They understand, as they look at a building that's on fire, what's the best way to tackle it? What's at risk? What do they need to prioritize on? And so it is when you prepare yourself during peacetime, you can exercise those plans. So when you're intelligence-led as a SOC, you bring all this into play, like the firefighters do, to protect lives and property. And so it is for the SOC. So peacetime was about the smart use of intelligence. And in wartime, then we are using intelligence to stay up to date with the threat. So we're going to talk today about that wartime focus. This is this pivot point between success and failure for the security team and the chief security officer. You're always judged on what happens here. As my C-levels used to say to me, Steve, you're only as good as your last incident. Great. So it's all about decision making. And you'll all be familiar, I hope, with the OODA loop, which is from the US Air Force in the 1950s. Observe, orientate, decide, and act. So a key thing for an organization is to be able to gather the right information, to contextualize it, that's the orientation piece, in order to make decisions that they can then execute with impact and velocity. Decision-making cycle, iterate, 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 iterate. For the US Air Force, it kept the pilots in the air, so they went to their mission, they completed their mission, and they came home safely and weren't shot down. Same for security. Intelligence, insight from the latest threat intelligence, and real detections in order to ensure you're taking the right decisions and getting out ahead of the threat, the attack that's hitting your organization. And in my experience in wartime, the first 60 minutes, I call it the golden hour, was critical. What we could achieve in those first 60 minutes fundamentally calibrated the level of disruption and harm and impact we would suffer as an organization. So, enough slides. You want to see a bit about how, in Anomaly, we are transforming the golden hour. I joined Anomaly because Anomaly were taking the focus into security operations, into the analysts, into the folks that I'm not ashamed to say it, I loved my security team. They were fantastic, dedicated people that worked under extreme stresses. I want to make their lives better. So I came to Anomaly because I have the vision and the technology to achieve that. So let's focus in on this golden hour. Sit back and watch this, and I'll give you a running commentary. So, we all remember MOVE It as a vulnerability. CISA advisories coming out, a huge amount of information. This also hit the news. So executives were talking about it. My phone was ringing off the hanger saying, what is this? What is this? They want to know what it is. So, how do I give them a cogent understanding of what this threat is so that I can kind of get them kind of off my back for a little bit? So what I can do is I can use my co-pilot, bring it into play here, and I'm summarizing everything that's here for my executives. So there it goes. It's now summarizing that huge amount of text. That's what it is. It's giving in information on targeted countries and entities and key takeaways. Look at that form factor. It fits into a mobile phone screen. So that's perfect for my executives. I can send it straight to them. Now, I want my SOC team to get busy on this. So now I'm scanning this page. You imagine how long it takes an analyst to go through a page like this. Hours. I don't have hours. We've scanned it, and we've pulled out all the relevant intelligence, 223 entities. I've already matched it to my telemetry, and I know I have 3 exposures. So the second question I get from my executives are we impacted? Well, unfortunately, yes, we are. So I'm grabbing all of this now, and I'm pulling all the known indicators in as observables into my environment. And there's 155 that I need to action. And because I've brought them in and they're already being fidelity checked, I can automate them going down to my endpoint protection for file hashes, to my firewalls for IP protection, to my DNS for domain protection, to my proxies, etc. Great. Now I have updated my security frontline controls. Now I want to investigate the threat and understand what this means in broader detail. So I've pulled everything that's in this environment, and I'm taking it into my investigations workbench. By the way, we're only like 5 minutes into the golden hour, and remember what I've just achieved already. Yeah? So it's pulling it all in, and you'll see it's loading in the entities there at the top right-hand side. And what you'll see here is it has already codified it into the MITRE ATT&CK framework. We all love MITRE ATT&CK, right? Fantastic framework. It's showing what is more prevalent within that attack. I know what my security coverage, my strength and tooling is, so I can see where my hotspots might be within my environment in terms of my security controls, where I might want to tactically take action in order to snuff out and improve the resilience now that I understand what this threat looks like. But it also is pulling all of the entities together here into an environment where I can almost do a minority report, kind of moving around and looking at the situation from different angles. I could have different teams looking at the actor groups. But let's move on. Let's move into here, into the SOC. Here I have the co-pilot within the SOC. I have junior analysts here who may not know how to do the queries against all those different elements of telemetry, right, to go and do stuff. So why don't I just put a natural language query in to say, have I been affected by MOVEit? What it's doing here is taking all of the known intelligence around MOVEit and matching it against all of my telemetry that I've brought into the platform, and then will show me whether I have and where I have anything that I need to worry about. And the query is up there at the top. So the analyst is learning the query language as they go along by using their own natural language. And there we see that IP address, .144. That's part of the MOVEit campaign. Unfortunately, we can see it's happened in my environment. I have an asset that has interacted with one of the known malicious IPs. And that was there already in the first time we scanned this as well with the co-pilot in the browser. So I was immediately alerted that I needed to get that forensic team properly enabled and get moving towards that. Now, I can see here that the traffic was allowed through my firewall. So I've got the firewall stuff here. So I had traffic. But then you can see that automated import. I've now got the blocking of my firewall. So, job's been done. I can actually see that I've also got the protections in place. So I can see I had the traffic, but I've now closed the door. That's fantastic. So somebody might want in the SOC to say, well, what is the MOVEit vulnerability? And they get the information, but the co-pilot will always tell you where they've sourced the information from. And for our co-pilot, that's in the global threat repository that we have within the platform, which is already created. It's already high fidelity, so we don't have hallucinations. But then I can ask a follow-up question. I can talk to my co-pilot and say, well, what steps can I take? And it will make the suggestions for me that I can start to enact. So we're really helping that decision-making cycle that the analysts need to exercise. Isn't this amazing? Within the first hour, we are operating in a very calm, measured way. I've informed the business. I can give them an update. We've gathered all this information together. I can export this all out into a report with everything that we've got here, into a PDF that I can share with the business to say, you know, guys, we've got this. This is where we currently are. This is where we are with the investigation. And as we build more information into that investigation, I can reissue those reports as updates. So in a matter of minutes, because this is what, about 5–10 minutes in terms of a sort of a recording, and it was recorded in real time, Look how far we have got in the golden hour. That's why I am so excited and inspired for the future of security operations. So, how do you become an elite SOC? Well, I'm going to use a footballing analogy here. So if you've ever, seen young kids when they first get to play football, what do? Right? They all chase the ball around the pitch. And many SOC teams have to operate in this way because they've got nothing better that they can do. They just have to chase the technical aspect of the incident and try and do their best. But they're essentially chasing the ball around the pitch. They know they could do better. When they get better tooling and evolution, they realize that actually a football team is made up of different positions, different skills. You've got your goalkeeper, defenders, you've got your midfield, you've got your attackers, your sweepers, your strikers. And everybody has a part to play. So they understand how to play the game of football. But every time they turn up for match day, they're just playing to their own talents. What happens at elite level, right? In the Premier Leagues in Europe, in the Champions League, in the Europa League, they analyze their opponents. They understand how their opponents are going to play, how they will attack, how they will move towards them, and they will understand how to disrupt their movement, how to disrupt their set plays, and essentially prevent the ball going in the back of their own net. That's the elite level of performance. But that is, what is that? That's intelligence-led security operations. So, this is what we mean by security operations done differently. And it's about visibility. Yesterday in Peacetime, I talked about the visibility in terms of the threat landscape relevant to the business, visibility of your attack surface, and prioritize attack surface reduction, automation of relevant threat intelligence to go down to your security controls. You're already a bit of a step ahead, and preparation for the teams, because you have created the time to be able to do that by doing this prioritization and utilizing the threat intelligence with our artificial intelligence. Today, in wartime, well, this is about the visibility of what's happening across the estate, and for that to be instantly associated with the latest threat intelligence from that attack. That gives time back to the analysts to do that analytical stuff, not just to identify assets that are compromised and recover them, and make sure that nothing goes beyond that, but to think about the broader context of the threat, what the attack chain is likely to look like, so they can take tactical steps in order to create the choke points to defend themselves as this threat unfolds. And remember, no threat stands still. It always evolves. There's always new information that will come out, new malicious infrastructure, et cetera, morphic malware, et cetera. So you need to keep pumping the latest threat intelligence into your defenses and into your analysts so they can make the right choices for the organization, because the decision-making cycle at the pace or better of the incident is what determines the harm and disruption to you and your customers, and essentially, how you're viewed in the aftermath of any attack. So, you can get here with AI. This is where AI is really important. I've said about the importance of the AI being within the confines of the security platform. So you can trust it, so you can go back to the sources. So in threat landscape, we're summarizing news, advisories, and blogs. So we've used our intelligence as well to sort of pull in all the RSS feeds from all of the certs around the world, the researchers, the news, Security Weekly, all that kind of stuff. And we process it through the AI and taxonomize it. So you already have the information about what it's relevant to in terms of actors and countries and so on, and summarized it. So now you can keep up to date with what's happening, what's relevant. And it doesn't matter what language it is. It could be any cert from around the world speaking a language you don't speak, because it will translate it to your language. Even better. So you can also school the AI in your business, so it's starting to bubble up to the top, the stuff that's going to be relevant to you. Again, helping you to prioritize your time on what you look at. Security postures, helping you in specifying your threat hunting. You're feeding the intelligence down to your security front line. You can even apply it to skills that you don't have within your SOC. So to say, what would an attacker maybe do next with this? And because it understands, the breadth and the depth of attacks, it can start to suggest things. So you almost get a different brain, a different skill set, a different viewpoint coming in for you. And we've just talked about wartime, so I won't labor the point on that. But I really believe this, that applied correctly, this is about augmenting the analyst. The analysts are Tony Stark, and the AI applied with our co-pilot is the Iron Man suit, is Jarvis. Okay, I love Hollywood films, right? And I just see AI like that. It's not removing analysts from the SOC. A SOC will not be replaced by a rack of computers. It is human augmentation in order to create more ability for the analysts to do a better job and feel better about making a difference for their organizations. So look, I'm excited. I think we're at a point where we need to set a new course for security. And with application of AI and intelligence and visibility to create the time, a huge difference can be made to the people that I care deeply about, which is security analysts, whether in cyber threats, whether in the SOC, whether they're protecting wider parts of the business. This is a game changer. This is the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. We appreciate this amazing presentation. Now we would like to give a word to our audience for questions. Are there any? Yes, we have.
Hey, thanks, Steve. It's a great presentation. I was just curious, going back to the example you gave about querying, am I affected or impacted by Move It, right? From the analyst perspective, I was also curious if maybe you had some insights or some of your experience in the past about how you were told by your fellow execs you're only as good as your last incident, flipping the script a little bit on the CIOs and saying, I'm only as effective as your application inventory or as your asset inventory. So that works really well when you have an organization that knows everything about all of their assets. I was just curious if you had any thoughts on how you would say, okay, well, we could take advantage of these queries, of these tools, but our book of record is garbage, or we don't define what our assets are and stuff like that.
Correct. So hands up who's got an accurate asset inventory for their organization. Right? It just doesn't exist. You can work towards it, and you can keep trying to make it better. Certainly, you want to do it right for your critical assets, especially those that are critically facing the internet and operate your marketplaces and other things like that. You want to make sure you've got those understood. But you don't know for sure. BT had a vast address space. So we had a team that were doing proactive discovery, looking for assets that were popping up in our address space. Who are you? Do we know about you? What are you, right? And we looked at it in the same way that attackers would do their reconnaissance. So not just identifying them, but saying, are you offering an opportunity? Okay? So again, prioritizing the time. Going back to the CIOs and it becoming a proper team game. We always do post-incident reviews. We would always look at the timeline with my incident commanders of exactly what decisions we made when. And in post-incident review, we would look at those decisions and say, was there a better decision in hindsight we could have made? And what was it we didn't have that would have allowed us to make that decision? Because that's the improvement. And sometimes it might be knowledge about the business, and we would reflect that back to the rest of the business. I would take that report every month to the Security Council, which is the executive level at BT, and I would talk them through the anatomy of the attack, how we responded, and what we had learned from it. So this is the security narrative, because you're updating people on threat, our resilience at the time, and how our resilience can be improved. I now have a continuous conversation that underpins my requests for investment. It works. It's worth the effort. So, I commend it. But my incident commanders were just fantastic at, managing, keeping the calmness, keeping the organization across all of the teams that were playing their part. Because don't forget, it's not a technical thing. You might have data privacy people involved, lawyers, customer communications, business operations, IT, everything involved, right? But that coordination, and then the ability then to come back, take a breath, and review how we operated, and how we could have done better, and what stopped us from doing so. And many of the things that got in the way was time, that we couldn't get to the answer, or the query would take too long, or we just couldn't get there. It was like we didn't have the window, right? We may have a limited window of visibility, and the threat actually was like happening 6 months ago, but we only had 90 days of visibility, so we didn't know what we didn't know. In this platform here, we have broken all of those barriers. They don't exist anymore. That's why you see, I'm so excited, right? I really am, and it's because it's true.
Anyone else? Any additional question? Looks no, so let me thank again to Stephen.
Thank you so much. We're still on booth, so if you want to see something more detailed, we're not going anywhere for a little while. We'd be more than happy to see you, and thank you so much for staying to the very end. Thank you so much.